Hello and welcome to the tutorial for the Bright Stars Christmas stocking. The links to this pattern can be found below from Lil Rocky Wear, available on Makerist. Best way to join these patterns is with a glue stick. These are non-trim patterns, so you just need to line them up and stick them down. So we need to cut out 2 fronts mirror imaged, 2 linings mirror imaged, and 2 hanging loops mirror imaged. If you're going to be using the embroidery design, you need to transfer the stars from the pattern onto the fabric. And then you can decide on your colour palette on what threads you'd like to use. Next we need to get interfacing onto the inside of the 2 fronts. Fusible or non-fusible? I've got non-fusible, so I've used pins to hold it in place. Now we're going to start with the embroidery stars. Using the pattern, you simply come in from the back with a knot at the back of the fabric and you follow the instructions. Very simple straight line stitches. You knot off at the back, either cut a knot or you can loop around a knot. Think about your colour palette before you start. I've gone for bright stars. And remember, the instruction book that comes along with this pattern includes a step-by-step guide to creating these star embroidery patterns. There's simply a number guide. You follow 1 to 2, 2 to 3, etc. This really is a super simple embroidery pattern, suitable for beginners and children alike. Okay, and remember to knot off at the back. It's so important that you knot at the start and you knot at the back, otherwise you're going to lose your stitches. Here's our 2 fronts. Remember, they have to be mirror imaged. Give them a press. And then we're going to put right sides together. And using our 1 centimetre seam allowance, we're going to sew all the way around the 2 fronts, leaving the top open. Ensure you back tack at the start and the end of the seam. As mentioned in the pattern, we can use our pinking shears to clip these sides. Turn it through and do a spot check, make sure there's no holes. When you're happy, give it a press. And we're going to add any trim if you want to add trim. The trim line is on the pattern. This one is just a simple ribbon. So overlap at 1 seam, pin in place. Make sure it lies flat, and then overlap at the start. Pin in place. When you're happy, take it to the sewing machine. We're going to sew 2 lines of stitching. We're going to take off the free arm, so we've got some space to put our stocking in, because this is our small version. We're going to straight stitch on both sides of the ribbon. Choose a colour that matches the ribbon. Next one to our lining. So exactly the same as the front, but this time we're going to leave a small gap in the stitching line. It doesn't really matter where you put your gap. probably easier where I've put it. Going to leave for the small one about 5 centimeters. Then we need to snip. We can again use our pinking shears, or we can snip in the traditional method and take out little triangles and little snip lines. It helps when we turn it through that we have nice curves and we've removed a lot of the bulk. So we have our 2 hanging loops, right sides facing, and we're going to straight stitch our 1 centimeter seam allowance. Again, snip in and remove bulk. Turn through to the right side, and we have our little hanging loop. So now we have our fronts joined, our linings joined with the gap, and our hanging loop. Going to pop the lining and the outside right sides facing inside of each other, and in between we're going to put the hanging loop. So the raw edge is at the top and the loop inside, tucked inside. Line up the seams neatly and accurately, and then the same for the other. The hanging loop goes in the back of the stocking, not the front. Pin together, and we're going to straight stitch all the way around using 1 centimeter, because we have our little gap in our lining. If I can find it, there it is. That's what we turn through. Okay, here we are. When it's been sewn, give it a good press, and then you just push the lining into the self, and then we're going to close it, the little gap, with a slip stitch. Again, the instructions show how to do this. Basically, you go knot off, and then you go from 1 seam allowance to the other seam allowance. Little stitches going upwards. Pull them together and they close, and it's invisible. Next up is pom-pom. I've included 2 printable templates. Wrap a good amount of yarn around the template, and then there's a nice big gap in the middle for you to tie the knot. Tie it securely, and then cut the top and the bottom, take it off, and you have a fluffy pom-pom. You can tie that onto your loop, your hanging loop. Next up is the felt initial tag. Again, use your printables to print off your initial, and use that as a template to cut out 2 felt pieces. Pop the felt pieces together and securely hold. You can have a bob of glue, you can use a pin, a clip, and then we're going to blanket stitch around the edge. Grab a needle with a really large eye to make this easier, and thread up using your chosen thread. You want the knot to be inside the 2 pieces of felt. I've popped little holes in to try and show you a little bit easier. So you want the knot on the middle of the 2 pieces. And you're going to go through and through the loop. And that's your first stitch. Okay, so the thread is now at the top. And you're going to go through from the front, up, through the loop. You created your first blanket stitch. Always come through the front if you start on the front, through the loop, carry on. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at how to do the corners because they're a little bit trickier. So we do a normal stitch and then you go back through that original hole. Through the loop as normal. Okay, and then again through the same hole. So you're pivoting basically on this one hole. And then carry on. There we go, that's our completed felt initial. And we're going to pop a hole in. I have these funky hole punches, but you can use a pencil and some blue tack. And if you have them, you could add a little eyelet. You can add some ribbon or some embroidery thread and loop it through your hole and tie it onto the hanging loop, and you're done. Well done. I would love to see your completed stockings. Please do share